My call is for CEOs to break the wheel, break something, change something.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the New Rules of Work, where we explore the changing landscape of work and the dynamic between employers and employees. I have to say, I am incredibly excited to welcome our guest today, just Sallie Krawcheck. Now, I have known Sallie for many years. I actually looked up to her when I was getting started in my career. She has been on Fast Company's 100 Most Creative People in Business, Forbes, the world's 100 Most Powerful Women, Vanity Fair New Establishment list, which is a list that personally I'm excited to hopefully get on someday. And Sallie also has just a tremendous track record. So she led Merrill Lynch, Smith Barney, Citi Private Bank as CEO. She was a seed investor in the Muse, which thank you so much, Sallie, for supporting us in the early days. And today she's the CEO and co-founder of Ellevest, a digital-first investment platform for women. So Sallie, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Oh, it's Kathryn. It's my pleasure. I've just been a fan of what you're doing and of you and your team for I want to say so long, but for a while.
Well, I love that. And I was, it's funny as I was thinking about who did I want to talk to about the sort of changing nature of work, which frankly is such a big topic. It covers so many things. You are one of the first people that has come to mind because I think that, first of all, you've really had like multiple incredibly successful careers. You've done really powerful work. And I think with Ellevest in particular around, closing the gender gap. And you've said, I think, that your life mission is to help women reach their financial and professional goals. So I thought maybe we would center some of this episode around that topic, really, really breaking the wheel and thinking about how do we change the current paradigm around the gender gap. And so maybe a good place to start is, what does it look like today in 2019 to help women reach their financial and professional goals? How are we as a society doing this? How are you doing this? And for people who are listening who like to be a positive force for gender equity, what are some of the big trends or big things people should be aware of?
Well, it's a big, big question. And I'd start with, I've actually shifted my personal and professional goals. Those were big words used. I'm just now all about getting more money in the hands of women. That's just it.
I love it.
When women have more money, the positive ripple effect is so significant. Their families are better off, the economy grows, the markets are more healthy, society equalizes, nonprofits are better off, men are better off, so it's good for all genders. And there are, a lot of people working on this topic and talking about this topic, closing the gender pay gaps at work, which has been too slow, too slow, particularly for women of color. I found, Kathryn, there are two things there that work. One of which is, and it's not the next diversity committee or the next mentoring program, though those are great. What gets it done quickly is the senior leadership deciding to do it and looking at where are the differences and not falling behind we pay everybody the same at the same level. And just the fact that we haven't promoted any women, but saying, nope, that's part of the problem too. And the other thing that works is when women and our allies come together and engage with our leadership teams proactively around this. You can't do it as one person. All you can do as one person is ask for a raise. And that works for some people and doesn't work for other people. What can work is getting together with your diversity group and coming together with the leadership team and saying, look, here's this research on how quickly paid parental leaves pay for themselves. And you can Google the research on it. And so if we put that in place, we could, have fewer mothers and fathers leave after they give birth. And then we'll save you the money of having to find their replacement and train their replacement, a proactive engagement as opposed to everybody fighting for themselves. So that's one. And then, of course, what we're working on at Ellevest is even beyond the gender pay gap, women have not invested as much as men have. Put another way, they've left more of their money in cash. And that has cost the women who are listening to this podcast hundreds of thousands. For some of them, it'll cost them more than $1 million over the course of their lives. So wow. I built Ellevest, put together a great team to build Ellevest to help make investing more approachable and help women get that money. And by the way, that is something they can do on their own. They can't control the markets, but they can make the decision to invest on their own. Whereas, getting a raise is amazing. And, you can't do that all by yourself. You have to have your boss be okay with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I love this too, because I can't remember where I was the first time that someone said to me, men are asked to invest, women are asked to donate, to do philanthropy.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was so interesting. And I started noticing it in my day-to-day life. And I do think there's something that is potentially unintentional, but can have a really big impact. And so, giving women more opportunities, more confidence, more platforms to invest and to grow their wealth, I think is incredibly powerful.
It's huge. And we're solving a big problem. You and I both know as entrepreneurs, we often, when both of us were starting our businesses, we got the question of, are you a vitamin or an aspirin? And, a vitamin is a business that helps you, maybe solves a problem you don't really know you have. You don't have to worry about it. It's a good to do. It's not a must do. And aspirin, of course, I got a headache and I have to solve it. And you're going to reach for that aspirin first. I feel like at Ellevest, with women investing, we're actually solving, we're a horse pill. What do I mean by that? Money is not women's number one source of stress. Women, as you probably know, can lose up to 2 weeks a year fretting about it. The act of investing and saving, the taking of the action, is the number one driver of our confidence in our ability to achieve our future goals. And I think that's in part because it's that sense of, it's not how much we've yet invested, it's not how much, how a relationship is with our spouse or our education level, et cetera. It is, are we taking that action? And so we are solving a big problem. And I would take it even one step further. Something that the Muse is working on and we're working on is we help these individuals get more money, as we help women get more money. We all know we wouldn't have been a Me Too or Time's Up moment. That money is a source of power that enables you to quit the job where you're being chased around the desk.
Absolutely. And, it gives you that freedom. It can give you leverage in negotiations if you need it. I think that is so true. And, it's interesting to me when we look at the broader financial industry, there's obviously still a ways to go. And you've been a real, an advocate for kind of calling for the financial industry to quote unquote break the wheel in order to address the underrepresentation of women. So what does that, for people who may not be familiar with that phrase, what does that look like to you? And how should companies be thinking about maybe, going beyond the kind of pat basics and really addressing the problem head on?
Yeah. And of course, the phrase comes from Game of Thrones, which I guess Daenerys was going to break the wheel. She didn't.
Didn't work out that way, but I was really rooting for her.
Exactly for her the way she was expecting it to, but she did in fact break the wheel. And that's sort of the message there is sort of these half measures just haven't worked in financial services. I mean, can you believe that for years and years after the financial crisis of 2007, 2008, that the industry of Wall Street, which we all know went into the downturn white, male, and middle-aged, came out whiter, maler, and middle-ageder. That today,
did you learn nothing?
I know. I mean, you think like, let's try something different. Here's a good idea. How about we let some other people have a chance? But today, 86% of financial advisors are male. By the way, average age around 60. 90% of mutual fund managers are male. 98% of mutual fund assets for the whole industry are run by males. Okay, you might say, those guys are so good at this. Except here's the thing, the research actually tells us women are better money managers than men. And so it's an industry that all of us should care deeply about changing, but in fact has gone in the other direction. In fact, it's gone in the other direction, even though the numbers tell it should go that way, it's gone that way. And it's, by the way, supposedly the most return-sensitive analytical industry, and yet its own, I don't want to say biases, but the way they've been socialized that money managers are men have just led to it, overwhelmingly going in one direction. So, as I look at this and I say, Kathryn, if a friggin' financial crisis can't change the direction, right? Then, for certain companies, I'm not sure the next, hey, we're having a diversity cocktail party where we can all share tips and tricks is going to do it. So my call is for CEOs to break the wheel, break something, change something, such as a Mark Benioff did at Salesforce, where he just closed the gender pay gap. As we also are seeing at a PayPal, at a MasterCard, who probably not coincidentally are all investors in Ellevest, where the CEO has just said, just what worked before, the fact that we've been doing it for 10 years doesn't mean that in 10 years plus 2 months is going to start to work. Let's just do something different.
Yeah. And I think that's what it's going to require to make these big changes. I mean, I remember when I was starting the Muse, there were a lot of very well-intentioned people that, were willing to give me advice and were willing to give me connections. But to some extent, I was like, look, to get this business off the ground, I need investors. I need money.
I need money. I know.
Exactly. Like sometimes people just have to give someone the promotion, give someone the chance, look at your gender or your racial and ethnic disparities and say, we are just not going to allow this to happen anymore.
Oh,
and I think that
I know.
I will say,
I have a similar story. We had a company that was looking at a fund that was looking at investing in Ellevest as part of a bigger company. And, they said, well, we might put in $2 million. And I said, you're so big and we need capital to grow it out. I said 10 would be better. And they came back and said, well, actually, we'd like to host a dinner for you.
You're like, I can host my own dinner, thank you.
And of course, every way I've been socialized, I would, I didn't say, how dare you, how patronizing, you got to be kidding me. Of course, I was, oh, thank you for that offer. That's amazing.
My version of that was in the early days of the Muse. There was one female-focused investment fund in New York City. There was only one. And I cannot tell you the number of patronizing conversations I had where someone, they might have well addressed me as little lady, although no one actually did, but they would say, this seems like a nice project, but I don't think it's a fit for our fund, but have you talked to, and it was like after the 17th time, again, I was just like,
I know.
It would be great. So I do think though, with the breaking the wheel reference, I was quite bummed that Daenerys ended up, not to give any spoilers, but I was really rooting for the strong female leader.
Yeah.
So I guess I want to go back a little bit because you spent the first part of your career working your way up the ranks on Wall Street, and you had leadership position after leadership position. You were really one of the most well-known and well-respected women on Wall Street for a long time, and so I'm sure you must have encountered some elements of company culture that maybe were positive, some elements that were more challenging. And so when you founded Ellevest and you started building your team, you had your own company to try and influence and create from scratch. What were some of the things that you set out to do differently in terms of culture, in terms of the workplace and the work environment? How did you think about that?
Well, Kathryn, I'm a research analyst by training. So when I was in my formative career years, the job that I loved was research analyst, in this case, equity research analyst. And so what I learned from that is look at the facts, look at the research, look at the statistics, and go where they tell you to go. That while I might think that my intuition is stronger than someone else's intuition, great. But if I have facts that tell me differently, go with the facts every single time. And what the research tells me is to build great companies is to build diverse and inclusive companies. And that not only can help on the investing side, where that research is telling us that diversity of input, of background, et cetera, can lead to better investing results, so better results for our users and clients. But that it's also the case when it comes to building the company itself. And that missed opportunities aren't missed as much when you have a diversity of thoughts, background, perspectives, gender, orientation, et cetera, around the table. And in fact, I would say it's probably no surprise that the investing industry, the industry of Wall Street, being so overwhelmingly male, has done such a much better job for men as clients than for women. And it's probably not a surprise that Ellevest is the first one to really crack the code. So at Ellevest, we've got today representing who our users are. And we, by the way, we also, men are very, very, very welcome, our male allies, to invest with us, and people of all genders here. But we are majority female, representing our user base. Our engineering team is more than half female, which is absolutely unheard of for an engineering team of any size.
That's phenomenal.
I will get the numbers off by a little bit, but depends on who, the day and the hour, but we're about 45 to 48% people of color. We over-index to non-binary individuals. And so, Kathryn, when you come here and walk through here, this looks like no fintech or wealth management or asset or financial services company you've ever been in. It is the most diverse, and I think we're actually becoming the place where if you look at a Goldman Sachs or you look at, say, a SoFi on the fintech side, and say, that doesn't represent me, that you say, I've got to go to Ellevest. That is a place where I feel like I can bring my full self. And in fact, one of my wonderful moments here is a woman who had not come out at her prior job and, was here for a little bit. And then she looked up and said, yep, I can come out. Here we go. And it was just such a wonderful moment that someone really felt like, whereas they had been in the industry for a while and couldn't bring their full self to work, that they could do it at Ellevest. And so I don't think our early success and momentum and growth is any coincidence, because it comes from that place of diversity, which means we're bringing in the best thoughts and ideas.
Absolutely. And to have that sort of environment, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, which is that it compounds, right? And that works in both directions. If you are, if you put diversity and inclusion on the back burner and you wait a long time to address it, the problem often gets worse. No. But whereas when you put it front and center and you start making progress, if that progress is genuine, if the people who are in your company are really advocates for what you're doing and it's a genuine movement, you can often start to see that pay dividends in a really powerful way.
There's no doubt about it, but it has to be a conscious decision. And even here, we have points when we veer off. And for us, it tends to, in the early days, it tended to be, all right, here's another white woman, let's hire her, and yet another white woman. And I said, oh my gosh, we're going to be a company of cheerful white women. And so, frankly, and by the way, Kathryn, when I talk to folks who, the managers who were hiring, who didn't have a ton of experience, hadn't been doing it for decades because it's a young group, they would say, wow, and you're going to hear all the catchphrases, right? We don't want to lower our standards. Oh, I interviewed X number of people. It's all the headhunters are showing us. I would love to, the next one, et cetera. And, it just, you fall into I've interviewed X number of people, so this is the entire candidate pool. I tell you what solved that, Kathryn, is I said, okay, we're not going to hire for the position until we find, somebody who doesn't reflect all of us who are already here, then we won't hire, because I don't need one more person just like me. And you'd be surprised by how quickly all of a sudden they were like, oh, okay, well, actually, here we have an individual with a different kind of background.
Yeah, it's committing. It's not taking the easy way out. And it's saying this matters so much that, and people do this in other forms of business all the time. You're not just like, oh, we missed our, important sales goal, or we didn't fix the product. Like at some points, it's just like, you got to get it done. And I think that's a really powerful approach.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I've got just a couple more questions before we wrap it up. One is, one of the things that we have not even touched on is, in addition to everything else that you do, you're also the chair of the Elevate Network, which is a global professional women's network with 135,000 members. So tell me a little bit about the work Elevate does. What does it mean to you, and what's the impact that the organization is having or looking to have?
Yeah, so I really appreciate you asking about that. Elevate Network is really built with the recognition that networking has been called the number one unwritten rule of success in business. that the guys, I don't know if this is still true for young people who are coming in the workforce, but up until not that long ago, somehow the guys just understood how to network earlier. I don't know if they were all on the football team together, the basketball team together, or whatever it was, but they recognized that the part of work, even work just isn't school, that, yeah, you should get an A on your assignment, but that's not the end of it. It's not you turn it in and then, yay, I got an A, next time to take a test. But that in some ways is the beginning of it, that you do great work. And then you're out and about, not in a schmoozy, weird, sleazy way, but in a learning way, in a sharing way. And that who you know is what you know. And that by having a glass of wine with someone and talking about industry trends as they see it from a different perspective, you've just added to your knowledge. And by the way, at the same time, that, you're on their mind and you're sharing with them and they feel like you're super smart. And then when the board position comes up, they're probably thinking of you, or the young person looking for a job, they're probably referring, or the, journalist who's looking to do a profile, or, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's playing in traffic. And what our research showed is that men were doing this early in their 20s. Women actually, and it's a little bit dated, Kathryn, but not so much, said, well, I think networking sort of cheating. And that I want to get the job because I got it on my own. And you're like, unfortunately or fortunately or whatever, who you know matters. A warm introduction is worth so much more than, a cold email. And so Ellevest is there. It brings women together, puts on a whole bunch of series of events. In fact, I was at one last night that was on what's going on in the economy and the market. So a lot of fun education, and at the same time, a glass of wine. And these women are just doing business together. They just are, and advising each other. And I think my very first event at Ellevest just warmed my heart. A woman had just lost her job, and she came and she said, I wasn't going to come. I'm so down. But you have free alcohol, so here we go. And the two women who she was talking to, both of them were getting her job opportunity. Like, here's a warm introduction. Someone said, hey, we're looking for somebody on my team who can. And you just saw that magic happen fast. So I'll add one thing. The research says that men whose friends are successful are more likely to be successful. Women whose friends are successful historically have not been more successful. And it really comes down to that networking, where the guys have given each other opportunities, talked each other up, put each other on their boards, and we women have not. Mm-hmm. And so, making sure we're being inclusive, we're hiring the right people, but, networking with each other so that we can never, ever lower our standards, and at the same time be thinking of each other for positions, help bring other women along.
I think you've really, and what I love is that you've hit the nail on the head with two different parts of this problem. I think one is not having the forums, the connections, the ability to meet the people that can help you get to where you want to go. And then the other is almost the social permission to ask, right? Because I do think that one of the other big differences is, as you've sort of hinted at, is a lot of women are not necessarily socialized that it's okay to ask your friends and your connections for advice, a referral, a this, a that. And I think it really has opened up so many opportunities for me personally when I became more comfortable letting my network know what I needed. And I think one of the things that's so powerful about the Ellevest network is that by its mission statement and by joining, it's clear that people are there, women are there to help each other. And so it also almost gives a permission and an encouragement to the asking, to the helping, to the receiving that I think can help also get people that access to what they need to move for their career.
And part of the messaging around Ellevest is don't join if you're not willing to help. If you're just coming in and you're just thinking about yourself, please don't. Please don't. But come in with sort of an open heart and mind, and absolutely, you will get that help and it'll come back to you in spades. Might not in the first month, might not even in the first year, and that's what I find, Kathryn, with my network is if you give, you will receive. And by the way, that's on average, and that means that there's some people who, geez, my gosh, I just have done so much for, and those people like you invite every year to your holiday party and you never get invited back. And finally you're like, do you ever do anything in your home? And are you ever going to invite me? And that's okay because it averages out because there's also the person whose 4th of July you go to. You don't
exactly
have them back either. So it doesn't have to average out with every person, but it more than averages out across the network.
Absolutely. So my last question is very quick because I know we're almost out of time, but is there one piece of advice that you might leave us with either for people working in larger companies who are trying to have an impact, folks that are in startups or subsidiaries or divisions where there's rapid growth? Like you don't have to cover the whole field, but one kind of thing that you might leave people with who are really interested in learning from you and from, all of the experience of your career.
You're very kind to ask that. I would say that the major lesson of my career is that if you choose to really go for it, which I did, success and failure are two different sides of the same coin. What do I mean by that? I had the opportunity and privilege of running Merrill Lynch, running Smith Barney, back when I was at Smith Barney, the city president, I was chief financial officer of Citi. I've also been publicly fired twice, front page of the Wall Street Journal stuff. Those are not actually in opposition. Those are two sides of that same coin, that because I was out there working at such a high level and taking the risk that was needed in order to have the opportunity to do the big jobs and to take them, I put myself out there so that when my bosses, I was out there, I was running fast, the businesses were taking risks. And then when new bosses came in, they were like, wow, no, thank you, right? I always love to say, the only thing that was different about when I was at the top of the industry and when I was getting fired was my boss. And the fact that I was delivering about the same results, working hard, shaking things up, trying to put the client first. And there were bosses who promoted me because of it, said that's different. That's doing it, bosses who didn't want me around because I was doing things different. And so I think in popular culture, maybe there's a moment of struggle. Oh, my startup. Oh, we had a minute, in between buying the foosball machine and the big office with the brick wall.
But the narrative is like to the right.
Right. But, for 30 seconds, it was like, Mark Andreessen didn't invest in us. Oh, no. Now, oh, my gosh, that's okay. Now we're Uber. But it just didn't happen that way. It doesn't happen that way. And I don't have to tell you, you've had ups and downs as well. And,
absolutely.
And I think particularly as women, we just take them so much harder. Because we were pushed to get the A's, because we performed well at school, right, that those kind of failures, we're not ready for them and we're embarrassed by them. And that's what the research says. And so I think if you choose to have a big career, work hard, take the risk, go for it, and recognize that it's not if you fail along the way, it's when you fail. And people are just often not willing to accept that risk of certain failure at points along the way, in order to have the success.
Yeah. And I think also part of your story is the fact that, you leaned in to who you were. And sometimes that puts you on top and sometimes it doesn't jive with someone else's sense of, what they want. But rather than, contorting yourself to be different, it's like sometimes you just got to accept that this is not working and move on. And I've struggled with that in the past, but I think that's incredibly powerful.
Oh my gosh,
advice.
So important. Final thought. I think that's really, Kathryn, the thing we don't talk about. That sometimes it's not your fault. Sometimes you're actually just working for the wrong person who is never going to promote a person like you. That the last 12 people they promoted are nothing like you. And by the way, they could be a really, really nice person who has, a daughter at home and who went to an unconscious bias training class and all that stuff. And I don't think quickly enough we say, you know what, it's not me, it's him or her. And recognize that the only option then, because he or she has been in that job for 15 years, probably don't go anywhere either. Sometimes we just have to leave. Thank goodness we have a Muse to help us leave when we have to. But I think we tend to stay in jobs too long and blame ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, I think so many of us are socialized to take the blame, to take the responsibility, to say, it's probably just me. I should work harder. I should be better. I should be perfect. And sure, yeah, make yourself better. But I do think that's a really important point. Sometimes it's a letting go and moving on and finding a place where your style, your gifts, your strengths are really appreciated.
Yeah. That's right.
Amazing. Good. Well, Sallie, this was incredible. I feel like we could have talked for another hour, so maybe we'll have to have you back on at some point for round 2. But thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Great. Thank you for having me, Kathryn. Take care.
Take care. And by the way, for those of you who are listening, if you want to learn more, you can follow Sallie on Twitter at Sallie Krawcheck, at SallieKrawcheck. You can also check out Ellevest on the Muse. So go to themuse.com, search for Ellevest. You can learn more about what it's like to work there and apply to their roles. Bye-bye.
The Muse is the best place to research companies and careers. More than 75 million people each year trust the Muse to help them win at work, from finding a job to building the skills to help them grow and advance. Organizations use our platform to attract and hire talent by providing an authentic look at company culture, workplace, and values through the stories of their employees.
You've been listening to The New Rules of Work. To learn more about this episode and to research companies and jobs, visit themuse.com. To ensure you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast player. If you have any questions for The Muse or for host Kathryn Minshew, feel free to reach out to press@themuse.com. Thank you for listening. Until next time.